It was a beautiful day. This is April 19th. You can see the countdown clock. Endeavour was in great shape, sitting there on the pad, very clear blue skies in the background. You would think that you may be nervous on a day that you're going to climb atop 6 million pounds of rocket fuel that may not go the way you want, but particularly when we'd gotten up in the morning and we didn't launch until the afternoon. But you can tell from looking at the crew here, we are not nervous, and I've never understood why. The first time I've launched in the afternoon, I thought I might be. John may look a little nervous, but he's not, right here. He is just pumping up his suit, and you can see Scott is definitely not nervous. He's doing well, getting ready to go. It is a pretty exciting time. We're getting in our suits, obviously going through the final checks, and we've been trained so well. I think it's a real testament to training that we're ready to go, and for whatever reason, there just is not the apprehension.
Well, here we are walking out to the vehicle that takes us out to the launch pad. And believe it or not, we rehearsed this walkout. And you would say,
start, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Endeavour, extending the reach of the space station while extending partnerships above the Earth. Endeavour. Houston's now controlling. Endeavour's rolling on course through the International Space Station. The shuttle already traveling more than 200 miles per hour.
At this point, we're rocking and rolling. The shuttle solid booster rockets are firing, and there's a fair amount of shake going on. That continues for about 2 minutes until the booster rockets separate with a bang and a flash that you'll see right there. And now the space shuttle main engines continue to carry us uphill for about another 6.5 minutes, and the ride gets a lot smoother. There, the booster rockets are falling away to be used again. When the main engines flame out, we fly formation on the external tank, which Chris is about to snap pictures of. We fly formation on it for a while, and then we fly our fire our orbiter maneuvering rockets to get us into a stable orbit. Then we open the payload bay doors and do a massive reconfiguration to turn our trusty rocket ship into a spaceship ready for orbit operations.
This star you're looking at now is brilliant and becoming more brilliant all the time. That is the space station, and that's what it looked like to us during the rendezvous. You'll notice the flashing out the windows, and those are the jets that we're firing. We do a number of those during the rendezvous to make sure we can put the shuttle, as you see it closing down the station, in the right portion of the sky. I tell you what, the station is very intimidating. It is so large that even when we're 1,000 feet away, you feel like ducking that you're going to hit it. You can see our payload bay that Chris described earlier here with the shuttle. This shot was taken from the expedition crew as we're closing up. And I'm sure it's a little bit scary from their vantage point as well, with this big space shuttle, 250,000 pounds approaching from below. We're lined up now with the docking module closing on in. This is a target we use, and we make sure it's centered and all the alignments are flown out so that we have a successful docking. Here comes the docking. Station is coming from above. And watch the dynamics. At 17,000 miles an hour, although that was at 0.1 feet per second, there are some dynamics between the two. You saw this photo earlier. We're very excited to be there, and we were dying to get the hatch open.
Well, as was mentioned earlier, this was the most complex robotics flight in the history of the shuttle program, and it began the day after docking with the first of several difficult maneuvers. Seen here is the shuttle robotic arm, which is like a big crane, and I'm operating it, and I've grappled and lifted the cradle containing the space station arm out of the payload bay. As I lifted it out, it was just a magnificent sight passing over Baja California. I twisted it and brought it forward, overhead the shuttle cockpit into a position where we could temporarily install it on the International Space Station.
While Jeff was doing all the good arm work, Scott and I were downstairs getting dressed. You put them on the same as at home. You put on your pants, you put on your shoes, put on your jacket, and then here's in the airlock with John and Yuri helping Scott and myself get into the final stages of the spacesuits. Gloves, helmets, you can see our Snoopy caps, everything getting ready to depressurize and head outside. And it is like a chick coming out of an egg there as you open up the hatch and poke your way out and look at the world below. The two of us getting everything ready and starting to climb up on board Alpha, on board the International Station. to assemble the arm. Lower right is Scott installing that UHF antenna that Umberto mentioned. I'm riding the other arm, pulling up out of the way, and watch Scott here in the lower right. Nice mechanism built in a couple different places around the States to give the station space-to-space comm capability. And then it was time to bring the arm to life. I'm removing a bunch of blankets that kept it warm while it was unpowered. And then if you look in the lower right, Scott's driving a huge power drill called a pistol grip tool. I'm riding on the other arm. And the purpose is to release the huge bolts that held the arm during launch. We called them super bolts. They were about 3 feet long. Sort of like arrows. And so we put them over in that thing below my chest over there called the quiver, putting the super bolts away one by one.
Well, if you've ever dreamt about what it would be like to do a spacewalk, this is it. This is actually what I saw at the end of the Space Lab pallet as I was about to lift up the booms of the space station robotic arm. It took a considerable amount of force. Here's a different view of it. I'm on the left, and Chris is free floating on the right. Weighs about 140 pounds of force required to pop that up, and you can see it's a massive structure. It's 60 feet from end effector to end effector on the arm, and weighs about 3,000 pounds. You're going to see Chris back on the robotic arm, the shuttle's arm, with Jeff driving it, and we're going to unfurl the arm at the midway point, and you can see it's just a huge structure. And then we have another view of Chris at the end of the arm, and a very rare view of our own orbiter. There's the nose of the shuttle Endeavour from his vantage point. We then had to insert 8 very special bolts that we called expandable diameter fastener bolts. And these things required a considerable amount of force. We used the pistol grip tool that Chris talked about earlier. Used those and found that they weren't quite enough to actually rigidize the arm in place. So then we had to use brute strength and manually ratchet them. Here's Chris's pistol grip tool, and you can see it kicks back a little bit. In the lower left, you can see me actually manually ratcheting those bolts tight. And this is one of my favorite shots. It's a picture of Susan looking out of the fishbowl, or maybe us looking back in, but rare view of folks on either end of the lab.
Thanks. Well, after the first spacewalk was behind us successfully, we got to ingress on station. We'd been there for 2 days, and it's really exciting. I've been to the space station before a couple years ago, but there's a whole new dimension when you get to ingress with 3 of your friends that have been there for 6 weeks. And it's actually somewhat of an emotional happening, and you'll get the flavor for that. But it really is a great time and a great part. It was really great for us to be part of the expedition crew as we came on board. Here is Yuri. He recently had docked a station himself. They relocated the Soyuz a week before we got there, and he's pointing that out to us with his model. Here's Jim Voss and Susan at the Robotic workstation, who have been doing a fantastic job along with Yuri up on the station. We could not have been more impressed.
Well, after 4 days of being on the shuttle, we were more than ready to go into the bright, airy station where you can fly like Superman. And we're going to follow Scott now as he takes us on a tour of the space station. At the left of the screen, you can see a yellow dot that guides you. We're now entering the American Laboratory, or Destiny module, which, as you can see, is just jam-packed with scientific apparatus. From there, we go into the American Node, or Unity module, which has 6 huge hatches which connect various pressurized elements, and there's Chris at work. And we're going to follow Scott through the next wall, and you're now leaving the American sector. We're entering the Russian FGB, or Zarya module, wheel than the American modules, and it really brings back the long heritage of Russian space station flying. This was the first module of the space station. It's now used mostly for storage, and behind these walls are cupboards, basically, and it looks like a long square tunnel with carpeted walls. Then we move through another sort of an airlock type module into the last major pressurized element on this long string, and that's the service module, or Zvezda module. You'll see Yuri and Yuri there talking pilot talk with their hands and talking about how nice the launch was. And then as we pass them, we move into the kitchen of the service module, and there's a kitchen table on the left. Jim Voss and Yuri have staterooms on the right and left, where Susan has her stateroom in the laboratory. And then finally we move into the lifeboat of the station, or the Soyuz entry vehicle.
Raffaello, in the Endeavour cargo bay, we removed the umbilical providing power and in preparation to lift MPLM up. Moving these 20,000 pounds, it was quite a challenge, and Scott and I were maneuvering the robotic arm. When the MPLM was close to the station, then we latched with 16 motorized bolts. And this is the inside while we are doing unloading operation. We like to call this controller chaos while we are trying to stow all the items that we are returning to the ground. We transfer also experiments, and this is one that we transfer from the middeck of this Endeavour to the US lab, our laboratory space.
With Susan and Jim flying, this is where you operate the arm from, and this is the very first move of the space station arm, the Canadarm2, lifting the first of its huge joints up and out of the pallet that brought it up. With Jim and Susan, you fly it purely looking at the camera views inside and reaching around the side of the lab and over top of the shuttle to grab onto the side of Destiny to make it permanently part of the space station.
Well, our work outside wasn't done. We went out for another EVA on the 6th flight day, and we're getting set up to basically reconfigure all the power so that the new Canadarm2 could live and work on the space station for the next 10 or more years. John and Bones were in that flight deck of the orbiter keeping us on the timeline and driving the arm. And this is a neat shot of actually mating some of the power connectors that we use to power the arm. You can see that it's actually fairly challenging work. We're wearing a very thick pressurized glove. I'd liken it to trying to do brain surgery wearing a hockey mitt or a baseball glove. It's definitely very different than working in your own workshop. Some of the connectors were very fragile. We had to be very, very careful because they were made of fiber optic material, so I had to go very slowly and be deliberate. I don't think there are words in the English language that can describe the view. We certainly tried during our AVA, but here's a neat view from Chris's vantage point up on the node, looking down the whole stack about 200 feet towards the Endeavour shuttle. We had one other major task, which was to deliver a spare electronics unit. You can see Chris in the background there. And I had a beautiful ride on the end of the arm with Jeff at the wheel of the arm, and just a unique vantage point to see this from. On my left, you can see Chris and his maple leaf on the left side of his suit, and we click this new avionics unit onto the side of the lab. And like good tourists anywhere, Chris takes a couple of pictures for us here, some happy snappies, and then we take our last good look at planet Earth, and it was time to call it a day after about 15 hours of spacewalking on this mission. Mission accomplished, and as you can see in the next scene here, we have an empty payload bay.
Right now you are looking at our great commander, control measure, gliding through the lab. And now we are in PLM, where crew members had a fun opportunity to exercise in zero gravity in their free time. As you can see from this video, we achieved pretty good results.
Who's next?
The second spacewalk had powered up Canadarm2, and so it was now ready to hand off the pallet. we'd done a lot of work with the folks on the ground to get a good configuration, and I reached up with the shuttle arm and grabbed a hold of the right-hand side, and then the station arm backed away, a kind of, for Canada, a very historic handoff from the old arm and the new arm together.
After good teamwork, it was time to say goodbye. It felt sad to leave the station. Here comes the moment of closure of the hatch, and we said, "See you guys on the ground."
Well, after 8 days docked to this beautiful space station, it was time to leave. We do that by releasing some hooks that separate us, and we're pushed away very gently by some big springs in this mechanism. And we glide away at about a tenth of a foot per second. We fire our thrusters, very small thrusters, and increase that rate a little bit, but it's a very smooth and slow, very graceful movement away from the space station. And I can tell you at this moment, I was both very sad at leaving and also very proud to see this picture and the completion of our critical mission. We undocked over the Pacific, and about 10 minutes later, I looked down at maybe 100 feet out, and we were gliding over the Colorado Rockies, where I grew up. A very neat experience. We continued then up over the continental United States, up over Canada, which was very fitting that we pass over that great country as we depart. And I have to tell you, I looked at this, and there was a little bit of a conflict in my head as my brain said, this is not possible, but my eyes were seeing it. And I can tell you that it's really there.
After 13 days in space, it's time to come home. But first, we have to reconfigure the orbiter from a spaceship to an airplane to land safely on a runway. So Jeff and I, we are closing the payload bay door in preparation for entry. Actually, during the preparation, there is a lot of work to do. First of all, donning the launch and entry suit. And here you see Jeff in his last attempt to take advantage of the zero-G. And Commander Robel and Jeff are ready to start the engine firing for our deorbit. And at this time, we start free falling to the ground. And when we start hitting the atmosphere, you see all the results of the eating of the space shuttle against the atmosphere. At this point, we are still going pretty fast. And as soon as we start decelerating, we start feeling the effect of the weight again.
Well, the good news was the weather was gorgeous at Edwards Air Force Base. Bad news was it wasn't so good in Florida, so we made the right decision, or the right decision was made on the ground, and we came around. Down here you see the lake bed, which is kind of fitting because 20 years and 2 weeks before we landed, the very first space shuttle with John Young and Bob Crippen landed on that lake bed. We're coming down a steep glide path at 20 degrees, 300 knots. I was very proud of my pilot. You can see here he got the gear out at 400 feet above the ground. And here's a view again out the front window coming to this huge, beautiful runway. We use the ball, the light on the left to help track down. That truck's not exactly where you think it is. It wasn't on the runway. Touchdown at 195 knots, where you got the chute out again right away. Again, Bones did a great job. And we come kind of crashing down on the nose gear at this point and roll to a stop. And you saw the star, the twinkle there on the glass. And I think definitely somebody was watching us throughout this mission because it was 100% successful. Thanks very much in part to the folks on the ground.